Be Me, 28. Got hired as a new manager for a sales department a while back. It wasn't one of those hip tech startups with beanbags and kombucha on tap. Think more old school, gray carpets, beige cubicles, and a general feeling that time stopped around the turn of the millennium. The company itself sells some kind of specialized industrial equipment, not glamorous, but supposedly profitable. My mandate was clear: modernize the team culture. The big boss who hired me seemed like a decent old guy, but totally clueless about modern workplace dynamics. He just knew something wasn't right, and that his younger hires kept quitting. I had my work cut out for me. I walked in on my first day full of energy, ready to foster collaboration and create a psychologically safe environment for my new team. And then I saw him. The problem. There's one in every office, isn't there? The walking embodiment of everything wrong with corporate culture. He wasn't the oldest guy there, maybe late 30s, but he carried himself like he owned the place. Loud voice, booming laugh that seemed to take up all the oxygen in the room. He was constantly on the phone, pacing around his cubicle like a caged animal. The other team members, mostly younger guys and a couple of quiet women, were practically huddled in their seats trying to be invisible. It was a textbook case of a dominant alpha creating a hostile environment. A few hours into my first day, I heard it. A loud, deafening clang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I looked over the cubicle wall and saw him, the problem, standing next to a massive brass bell mounted on a wooden plaque. He was grinning, holding a small mallet. "Another one bites the dust," he yelled. A few of the other guys gave a half-hearted whoop and clapped. I watched, horrified, as he took a dry erase marker and wrote a huge number on a whiteboard under his column. His column was full. The others were mostly empty. So this was their system. Public displays of aggressive achievement. It wasn't about celebrating success. It was about asserting dominance, forcing everyone else to acknowledge his victory and, by extension, their own failure. I made a note. The bell had to go. That afternoon, I held my first team meeting. I introduced myself, talked about my vision for a collaborative, team-oriented future. I used words like synergy, holistic approach, and empowerment. I watched their faces. The younger ones looked hopeful, intrigued. The problem just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, with a look of bored skepticism on his face. When I opened the floor for questions, he was the first to speak. "So, what's our new quota?" Just like that, cutting right through my message about culture to focus on the cold, hard numbers. I smiled patiently. We're going to move away from a purely numbers-driven mindset. I want us to focus on building sustainable client relationships, not just closing tickets. He just grunted. Relationships don't pay the bills. A palpable tension filled the room. The other team members looked down at the table, refusing to make eye contact. He had already poisoned the well. My first official act as manager was to send out a memo. Subject: fostering a more inclusive and less disruptive auditory environment. It explained that, effective immediately, the sales bell would be retired. We would celebrate our collective successes in our weekly meetings, in a way that didn't create anxiety or a competitive hierarchy. I thought it was a masterpiece of corporate diplomacy. About 10 minutes after I sent it, he was at my office door. He wasn't smiling. "You're getting rid of the bell? We're retiring it, yes. It's part of our move toward a more team-focused culture." He just shook his head, a little smirk playing on his lips. "You know, the old boss loved the bell. Said it was good for morale." "Well, I'm here to build a new kind of morale," I said, keeping my voice even. "One based on mutual support, not individual bragging." He stared at me for a long moment. "Whatever you say, boss." The way he said boss was laced with so much sarcasm, it could have stripped paint. The next few weeks were a battle of wills. I implemented Wellness Wednesdays, where we'd start the day with a 10-minute guided meditation. He would always accidentally schedule a client call at that exact time. I tried to get the team to do collaborative brainstorming sessions on new sales strategies. He would sit silently through them, and then I'd hear him on the phone later, using his same old aggressive tactics and closing deals. The numbers on the whiteboard kept getting more and more lopsided. His column was a monument to his ego, while the others struggled. I realized the core problem wasn't the bell or the lack of meditation. It was the entire incentive structure, the commission system. It was a relic of a bygone era, a system designed to reward sharks and penalize collaborators. It was the very engine of the toxic culture I was hired to dismantle. I spent a weekend drafting a new proposal. I called it the Team Synergy Dividend. The concept was simple and elegant. We would abolish all individual commissions. Instead, a percentage of the department's total quarterly sales would be put into a pool. That pool would then be divided equally among every single member of the team. It was perfect. It would force them to work together. The stronger performers would have a vested interest in mentoring the weaker ones. The junior staff would feel valued. It would turn a pack of lone wolves into a cohesive unit. I presented it to the big boss first. He looked at the proposal, squinting at the charts. "So, you want to take the money he earns," he said, pointing a thumb in the direction of the sales floor, "and give it to everyone else?" I corrected his simplistic and frankly problematic framing. "I want to incentivize teamwork. I want everyone to feel that a win for one is a win for all." He was hesitant. "He's not going to like this. He's very motivated by his commission." "His motivation is part of the problem. It creates a cutthroat environment. We need to evolve. Trust me." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, Serena, it's your department. Let's try it for 1 quarter, see what happens." I felt a surge of triumph. This was it. This was the real change. I called a mandatory team meeting to announce the new plan. I laid it all out with a slick PowerPoint presentation. I talked about fairness, equity, and the power of the collective. I could see the younger team members nodding. They got it. They saw the beautiful logic of it. The problem was just staring at the screen, expressionless. When I finished, I asked for questions. His hand shot up. "Just so I'm clear," he began, his voice dangerously calm. "Last month, I brought in about 400,000 in new business. The rest of the team combined brought in, about 50,000? Under this new plan, I'd get the same bonus as the kid who started 2 weeks ago and hasn't closed a single sale." I kept my professional smile on. "You'd all be rewarded for the team's total success, and you'd have an incentive to help that new kid close his first sale, which would raise the total for everyone." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "So I'm supposed to do my job, and now I'm also supposed to do everyone else's job for them too, for less money? It's not about doing their job for them. It's about mentorship. It's about lifting the entire team up." "Right," he said, standing up. "Well, this has been really enlightening." He walked out of the meeting. His negative energy was so powerful, but I wouldn't let it derail me. The new system went into effect the following Monday, and for a little while, things seemed different. The office was quieter. The frantic competitive energy was gone. I saw the team members actually talking to each other, sharing tips. I saw one of the senior guys helping a junior member with a call script. It was beautiful. This was the culture I wanted to build. The problem was quiet. Too quiet. He was still at his desk, still making calls. But something was off. The manic energy was gone. He seemed to just be going through the motions. The whiteboard was my idea, but now it was working against me. At the end of the first week, the numbers were anemic. His column, which used to be filled by Tuesday, had only 2 small entries. The rest of the team had a few tiny ones. The grand total was a disaster. I called him in for a one-on-one. "Is everything all right?" I asked, putting on my most concerned and empathetic face. "I've noticed a significant drop in your output since we implemented the new dividend plan." He just looked at me. "I'm working my 40 hours. I'm taking my lunch break. I'm contributing to the team. But your numbers? I'm focusing on high-quality, sustainable interactions now," he said, throwing my own words back at me. "Building those relationships. You said it yourself. It's not all about the numbers." He was weaponizing my own philosophy against me. The level of passive aggression was off the charts. It was one of the most toxic things I had ever experienced. I told him that while I appreciated his commitment to the new culture, we still needed him to perform. The team was looking to him for leadership. "They don't need my leadership. They have yours," he said, then got up and left my office. The month dragged on. The total sales numbers were abysmal. The collaborative spirit I'd seen in the first week had curdled into a kind of quiet panic. The team members were trying, but they just didn't have his aggressive instinct. They couldn't close. They were great at the building relationships part. They'd have lovely long conversations with potential clients. But when it came time to ask for the sale, they'd falter. I had to do something. I decided to lead by example. I got a list of old cold leads and started making calls myself. I used all the techniques: active listening, validating the client's feelings, building a rapport based on shared values. It was exhausting. I spent 3 hours on the phone and managed to schedule one follow-up meeting for the next quarter. I came out of the conference room, drained from all the emotional labor, and saw him at his desk, just staring into space. I looked at the whiteboard. He had added one new sale. It was bigger than anything the rest of the team had done all month, but it was a fraction of his usual output. He wasn't failing. He was quiet quitting, deliberately sabotaging my new system from within. This was worse than his old loud aggression. This was a quiet, insidious form of masculine toxicity. The refusal to participate, the strategic withdrawal of effort, all designed to make me look bad and prove that his old, brutish ways were superior. The end of the quarter was approaching, and we were projected to miss our target by a historic margin. The big boss was starting to send concerned emails. The team synergy dividend pool was looking more like a team synergy puddle. Morale was at an all-time low. The quiet, collaborative office I had created now just felt dead. I knew what had to happen. The problem wasn't the system. The system was perfect. The problem was him. He was a cancer in the heart of my team. His refusal to get on board was dragging everyone else down. His silent protest was louder than the old bell had ever been. For the health of the team, for the future of this department, the cancer had to be removed. I started documenting everything: his lack of engagement in meetings, his failure to contribute to the new collaborative environment, his underperformance relative to his own historical benchmarks. I was building a case, not to punish him, but to save the team from his toxic influence. The final straw came during what was supposed to be a major client call. It was a huge potential deal, and I decided that the entire team should be on the call, at least in listening mode, as a learning experience. A younger, promising salesman was leading the call, using the new empathy-first script I'd written for him. The client was a gruff, old-fashioned type, the kind the problem usually handled. The young salesman was doing his best. So, what are the pain points you're experiencing that we can help you unpack? There was a silence on the other end of the line. Pain points? Son, I just need to know if your machine can handle 5,000 units an hour without overheating. Can it or can't it? The young salesman stammered. Well, let's explore the feelings behind that need for efficiency. It was painful to listen to. Suddenly, the problem, who was supposed to be silent, unmuted his mic. It can handle 6,000, his voice boomed, and we can have it on your floor by the 15th. Send over the PO. Another silence. Then the client said, "Good, done," and hung up. The problem had just hijacked the call. He'd undermined the young salesman, ignored my entire methodology, and used his aggressive, domineering tactics to close the deal. He hadn't just closed a sale. He had proven that he was completely unmanageable. He refused to respect my leadership or my vision. In that moment, he sealed his own fate. I let the team have their little celebration. They were just happy to see a big number on the board. They didn't understand the damage that had just been done to our culture. But I did, and I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called him into my office. I had the HR paperwork already prepared on my desk. I decided to get straight to the point. No need for the corporate doublespeak he despised so much. "This isn't working out," I said, my voice calm and firm. He just looked at me, not surprised in the slightest. He almost seemed relieved. "Yesterday's call was a clear example of insubordination," I continued. "You completely undermined a junior team member and disregarded the communication protocols we've been working so hard to establish." He had the audacity to shrug. "I got you the sale, didn't I? It's the biggest one this quarter." This was the core of his toxic mindset. Results over people. Ends justifying the means. "You got a sale," I corrected him. "But in the process, you damaged our team's trust and set a terrible precedent. We are building a culture of collaboration here. Your lone wolf approach is fundamentally incompatible with that vision." He leaned forward slightly. "Let me get this straight. You're firing me for doing my job too well?" The sheer arrogance. The inability to see beyond his own ego. "I'm terminating your employment because you have consistently refused to adapt to the new direction of this team. You've actively resisted our efforts to create a more supportive and equitable workplace. It's not about your numbers, it's about your attitude." He stood up, not angry, just resigned. All right, that was it. No yelling, no pleading, just a quiet acceptance that made my skin crawl. It felt like he knew this was coming, like it was all part of some calculated game. "HR will be in touch regarding your final paycheck and severance," I said, trying to regain my sense of authority. He walked to the door, then paused and turned back to me. "Good luck hitting your numbers, boss." And then he was gone. A wave of relief washed over me. The tumor was excised. The source of the toxicity had been purged. I walked out to the main sales floor. Everyone was quiet, pretending to be busy. They had obviously heard everything. I clapped my hands together to get their attention. "All right, team, let's huddle up." They gathered around my desk, looking like nervous sheep. "I know this is a big change," I started, infusing my voice with optimism. "But it's a necessary one. We are now free to build the culture we've been talking about, without any negative influences holding us back. This is day one of a new era for Harrison Industries." I looked at their faces, expecting to see relief, even joy. Instead, I saw fear. It was then I realized the true extent of the damage he had done. He hadn't just dominated them, he had created a dependency. They had used him as a crutch for so long, they had forgotten how to walk on their own. "This is our chance to prove that our methods work," I declared. "That empathy and collaboration are more powerful than aggression and ego. Let's get to work." The first day was quiet, eerily quiet. The absence of his booming voice on the phone created a vacuum, but I was confident. This was just an adjustment period. The next morning, the first email arrived. It was from the client on the call he had hijacked, the one he'd secured for us right before I fired him. Subject, purchase order. "Hi, Serena, was just informed about the staffing change. Unfortunately, our agreement was contingent on having him as our account lead. We'll be withdrawing our PO, best, etc." I stared at the screen. Contingent? That was ridiculous. Our contracts were with the company, not with an individual employee. This was unprofessional. I explained to the team that this was just a minor setback. The client was obviously part of the old boys club and was just being difficult. We didn't need clients who weren't aligned with our values. Then a second email came in, and a third. By lunchtime, we had received 7 cancellations. They all had a similar, professionally polite tone. In light of recent organizational changes, due to a shift in our account management, we've decided to reevaluate our vendor relationships. It was a coordinated attack. I gathered the team for an emergency meeting. Panic was starting to set in. One of the younger salesmen looked pale. "Those were all my accounts," he stammered. He helped me get all of them. He introduced me to them." I tried to reassure them. "This is just a temporary disruption. It's a loyalty built on a faulty foundation. We will win them back by showing them a better way of doing business." My words sounded hollow even to me. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone, trying to do damage control. I called the first client back. "Hi, this is Serena, the new sales manager. I just wanted to touch base and reassure you that you'll continue to receive the highest level of service from our team." The man on the other end was polite but firm. "Look, miss, nothing personal, but we worked with him for a decade. He understood our business. He knew what we needed before we did. It was a relationship. I don't have time to train a new person. Our whole team is trained and ready to—" "I'm sure they are," he cut me off. "We've already signed with another supplier. Good luck to you." He hung up. Every call went the same way. They didn't care about my promises of a new, collaborative approach. They didn't want a team. They wanted him. I couldn't understand it. What kind of spell had he cast on these people? It was a classic example of a toxic personality creating a codependent ecosystem around himself. These clients were victims, and they didn't even know it. By the end of the week, our sales pipeline was a wasteland. The whiteboard, which had once been his monument of ego, was now a monument to our collective failure. It was almost completely blank. The quiet, collaborative office I had dreamed of had become a morgue. The team members sat at their desks in silence, staring at their screens, afraid to even make calls because they knew they'd be rejected. The team synergy dividend was now a mathematical impossibility. There were no profits to divide. I tried everything to boost morale. I brought in donuts. I organized a team-building exercise that involved building a tower out of marshmallows and spaghetti. I doubled down on our Wellness Wednesday meditations. Nothing worked. The team was completely demoralized. They saw me as the person who had driven away all our business. A week or two after the firing, I was having lunch in the break room when two of the junior sales guys came in, not realizing I was there. They were talking in hushed tones. "Heard he started his own consulting firm," one said. "No way. Already?" "Yeah, and guess who his first client is?" The guy mentioned the name of our biggest, most important account, the one that had left on day one. "He took them all. He's poaching our entire client list." "How can he do that? Isn't there a non-compete?" "Guess not. Or maybe he just doesn't care. What are they going to do, sue him? He has all the relationships. We have nothing." I sat frozen in my chair, my half-eaten salad tasting like ash. So, that was his plan all along. This wasn't just a reaction. This was a premeditated act of corporate sabotage. He hadn't just been quiet quitting. He had been laying the groundwork for his own exit, taking our assets with him. My blood ran cold. The full scale of his toxicity was finally clear. He hadn't just been a bad employee. He was a bad faith actor. He had exploited this company's trust, used its resources to build his own personal empire, and then ripped it all away the second he was held accountable for his behavior. That afternoon, I received a calendar invite from the big boss. Title, Urgent Performance Review. I knew this was it. I spent the entire next day preparing my defense. I put together a new presentation. It wasn't about sales numbers. It was about narrative. The narrative of a brave change agent coming into a toxic system. The narrative of a saboteur who plotted to destroy the department from within. The narrative of a necessary, albeit painful, period of transition. I would make him see that I wasn't the problem. I was the one who had exposed the problem. I walked into his office, my laptop in hand, ready for the fight of my life. He wasn't alone. The head of HR was there, a stern-looking woman I had only met once. This was not a good sign. The boss didn't look angry anymore. He just looked tired, defeated. He gestured for me to sit down. "Serena," he began, his voice heavy. "We need to talk about the sales department." I opened my laptop. "I have a presentation that will explain everything." He held up a hand. "No presentations. Let's just talk." He slid a single piece of paper across the desk. It was a graph. A line graph showing the department's sales revenue over the last 6 months. For the first 5 months, the line was a steady, healthy upward trend. In the last month, the line didn't just dip. It fell off a cliff. It was a vertical drop to near zero. "This last month," he said quietly, tapping the catastrophic drop with his finger, "coincides with your new team synergy dividend plan and the subsequent termination of our top-performing employee." I took a deep breath. As my presentation would show, his performance was a bubble. It was based on unsustainable, aggressive tactics and personal relationships that were a liability to the company. What we're seeing now is the bursting of that bubble. It's a painful correction, but a necessary one for long-term health. The HR woman spoke for the first time. "We've been getting some reports from the remaining team members, Serena. They describe the current environment as hopeless and anxious. Several have put out feelers to recruiters. They don't seem to feel that this correction is very healthy. They had gone behind my back. My own team, whom I had liberated, had betrayed me. I felt the walls closing in. They're scared," I insisted. "They're reacting to the shock of the change. They've been conditioned by years of his toxic leadership. They need more time to adapt to a healthier way of working." The boss leaned back in his chair and sighed. It was a sound of profound weariness. "Time is not something we have, Serena. Our Q3 projections are a disaster. The board is calling me every day. We're in crisis mode." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real anger in his eyes. "You came in here with all your theories and your buzzwords. You dismantled a system that, for all its flaws, worked. It produced results, and you replaced it with this. A department that doesn't sell anything." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I trusted you to modernize the team. I didn't expect you to destroy it." I sat there, stunned into silence. Destroy it? I was trying to save it. I was the one who had the courage to stand up to the source of the rot. With all due respect, I began, my voice trembling slightly. The department was already broken. It was a cult of personality built around one toxic individual. I tried to democratize it, to make it sustainable. Sustainable? He scoffed, the politeness gone from his voice. We've lost 80% of our client base in 3 weeks. We're projected to lose money this quarter for the first time in 15 years. You call that sustainable? I looked at the HR woman for support, but her face was a neutral mask. She was just an executioner. He sabotaged us, I insisted, my voice rising. This was a coordinated attack. He convinced our clients to leave. This isn't a failure of my strategy. It's a testament to his disloyalty and unethical behavior. The boss actually laughed. A short, harsh, humorless sound. Unethical? He built relationships over a decade. He gave them good service and they trusted him. When he left, they followed him. That's not unethical, Serena. That's just business. A part of business you clearly don't understand. Every word was a blow. He was twisting the narrative, reframing the bully's actions as sound business practice. He was blaming me, the whistleblower. The HR woman cleared her throat, a signal that the conversation was over. Serena, I think it's clear that there's a fundamental misalignment between your management philosophy and the commercial needs of the business, she said in a dry, rehearsed tone. As such, we've decided to go in a different direction. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. It was exactly the same corporate speak I had used on him. The irony was suffocating. I just sat there, my mind blank. My presentation, my defense, my vision, it all amounted to nothing. They didn't want a visionary. They just wanted the numbers. They had me escorted back to my desk by a security guard. A security guard, as if I were a criminal. The team wouldn't look at me. They just stared at their monitors as I packed my few personal belongings into a cardboard box. My world's best boss, probably mug. My little succulent plant. A framed picture of my cat. The entire walk of shame to the elevator. I could feel their eyes on my back. Not with sympathy, but with what felt like resentment. I had promised them a new, brighter future, and all I delivered was chaos and unemployment. I spent the next few weeks in a daze. My professional world had collapsed. My LinkedIn profile, once a monument to my progressive management style, now felt like a joke. I started applying for other jobs, but the market was tough. Recruiters would get to the part about my last role and ask the inevitable question. So, why did you only last 1 quarter at Harrison Industries? I tried to spin the story. Creative differences. A strategic realignment. The company wasn't ready for transformational change. They could smell the failure on me. One afternoon, out of a morbid curiosity that I couldn't resist, I looked him up online. It wasn't hard to find him. He had launched a website for his new consulting firm. It was sleek, professional, and full of testimonials from all of our former clients. The best damn salesman I've ever worked with. No nonsense, just results. Frank, the one I'd heard him yell at on the phone. He understands our needs better than we do, a true partner. Switching to his new firm was the easiest business decision I've made all year. Reading them made me physically ill. They were all praising the very behavior I had identified as toxic. The aggression, the refusal to engage in emotional labor, the hyper-focus on results. They didn't just tolerate it, they valued it. They paid him for it. The About Us section of the site had a picture of his new team. It was him, standing with 3 other people in front of a shiny new office building. I recognized them. 2 were the other senior salesmen from my old team who had been quietly supportive of my changes. The 3rd was the most promising junior salesman, the one he had undermined on that final call. They were all smiling. They looked happy. He hadn't just taken the clients, he had taken the talent too. He'd gutted the entire department, leaving behind only the dead weight. My liberated team hadn't betrayed me by going to HR. They had betrayed me by rejoining their captor. It just didn't make any sense. My entire worldview, my understanding of how a modern, healthy workplace was supposed to function, was shattering. A month or so later, I was scrolling through a job site when I saw a posting. Sales manager, Harrison Industries. They were hiring my replacement. I read the job description, my heart pounding. Seeking a results-driven, high-energy sales manager to lead and motivate a dynamic sales team. The ideal candidate will have a proven track record of exceeding aggressive sales targets and will thrive in a fast-paced, competitive environment. They had used all the trigger words: results-driven, aggressive, competitive. It was a complete reversal of everything I had stood for. They weren't just replacing me, they were erasing me. They were actively seeking out another version of him. The last line of the description was the final insult. Responsibilities include fostering a high-performance culture and managing the department's victory bell traditions. They were bringing back the bell. I closed my laptop and just sat there in the dark. I had been so sure, so absolutely certain that I was on the right side of history. I was bringing enlightenment to the cavemen. I was creating a better world. But what if the cavemen didn't want to be enlightened? What if they were happy in their cave? What if they liked the competition, the aggression, the loud, clanging bell? What if everything I believed about male toxicity in the modern workplace was just wrong? No, that couldn't be it. I was right. My philosophy was sound. The system was the problem. The world was the problem. It just wasn't ready for me. It was still rewarding the bullies, the aggressors, the men who refused to evolve. He hadn't won. He had just successfully exploited a broken system. And I was just a casualty of a culture war I was trying to win for everyone. I opened my laptop again. I deleted my old resume. I started a new one. My objective? To find a truly progressive organization that values emotional intelligence and collaborative success over outdated, patriarchal metrics. Somewhere out there, my team was waiting for me. A team that would appreciate what I had to offer. It had to be. Or